Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Debatable with your hosts, Nina and Kyle. I'm Kyle.
I'm Nina, and today I wanted to talk about how you can get people interested in debate. I know it's recruitment season for a lot of organizations. Some are finished with recruitment, some recruitments are ongoing, and some haven't started yet, but it's the start of the school year, so everyone is interested or trying to get people interested in debate.
Yeah, a couple of partner institutions were telling me that can't we have our first session in October because our recruitment season is still ongoing. We still need time to figure out who will go and stuff like that. So I know for a fact that recruitment season lasts somewhere from the beginning of the semester towards like the beginning of October. So it's usually a month.
Yeah, it's like until the middle of the semester sometimes for like more intense recruitment seasons or organizations that have a longer process.
Yeah, in UP Diliman, we have an application season that takes up the entirety of the semester, right? Like we're
Yeah.
a huge part of the semester.
Is that still how they do it?
Yeah, the application process takes quite a long time. So you sign up in the beginning of the semester, and when it starts, it lasts until around 75% of the way into the semester because there's a whole app process. So sometimes you have cases like that, but in most high schools, as far as I know, there is a sign up sheet and then there is like an audition or something like that.
Mm.
And people decide whether or not you get in. In some high schools, they just like, okay, you're in.
Yeah.
How was it for you in your high school?
In St. Skull, Manila, I had to go through a sort of audition process. It was really a short interview where they made me do a few speeches, they asked me a few questions, and then it was determined whether I would join the team. But that was because debate wasn't a club yet in our school. It was more like a varsity team. So a little bit stricter. But I think after a while, they made the application process more like a club. So you just get a registration sheet, you attend the orientation, you decide if you want to do it or not, and then you get in. But this is not the case for all institutions. It's a very Filipino thing, actually, the
Oh,
way we
really?
have this. I mean, I taught debate in different countries as well, and for them, it's mostly like, oh, you sign up. For other places, it's a school, right? That it's like Kumon, where it's an after-school program that you sign up for, you pay for. We also interview, but that's mostly to assess, like, oh, what group will you join? What kind of other classmates will you be having? Either way, I think what's very common is there's a process or there is a part of it where we sort of have to do a little bit of an assessment. And during these assessments, at least from my experience of interviewing multiple types of students from grade school to high school, even in college, you see that there are different interest levels, right?
Yeah.
And I understand debate is not something that you can see before you join it. It's not something you see on TV. It's not something you read about. There's not a lot of hype with
Or
it.
it's something that's just like there's a very steep learning curve
Mm.
and you need to invest a lot of resources in order to be at the level where you'd be satisfied or I would say that debate is a little bit addicting for me, but admittedly it did take a while for me to get over the nerves and start feeling the adrenaline. It also that's the reason why I was going to comment that for many institutions you would see a lot of people signing up initially and then that number goes down. Like the people who stay goes down.
I think that happens in any sport though. So I wouldn't say it's unique to debate. A lot of people get interested in different sports and they try out for the team and then only the ones that take it seriously end up staying.
Oh,
So
because you have done multiple
and
I've only done swimming
I've
and
done multiple sports and I'm the one that like falls out of love and like leaves.
like
That's
so
me.
out of like let's say a
Mm-hmm.
hundred, what's the percentage of people who end up staying?
In debate or in sports, like
In sports.
oh, in sports I would say maybe 50%.
50% stay.
50% stay and reach varsity level. Some do stay, but I wouldn't consider it staying because they're just like they're in the team, but they're not active. They're there for training sometimes, but they're not trying to be at a competitive level. So I would say maybe 70% stay in the
Quote unquote stay.
yeah, but only 50% would actually take it seriously enough to reach like a competitive level.
That's quite high,
I
I would
mean,
say.
yeah.
Like, in comparison to debating.
Mm.
In my previous institution, not UPD, but we did have like a betting pool or of some sort where we go like, okay, we have 40, 50, 60 applicants. We accepted all of them and let's take bets. Like between these 60 people, who are the 2 or 4 people that you would expect to stay? I was talking to one of our partner institutions last night after a class. They told me that if they have like 40 new members, they would train them separately from the more experienced members. And then a lot of them will leave, and their real filtering mechanism is who has the commitment to keep going to training.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's a good standard.
Yeah, and what I said
Yeah.
was it takes determination and persistence rather than just like raw talent.
Mm-hmm.
But that got me thinking like, how can we help institutions to make more people stay? Like, not make them, like force them, but like, how can we increase the retention rates? You
Right.
know?
Because I think that my mistake when I was coaching and when I was handling recruitments before, not that I personally handled them, but I was a senior, I was playing a role. There was an expectation on my end that everything has to come from the debater. They have to be the ones with the commitment, with the passion, the ones to put in the effort. And I realized now that I'm teaching younger kids. So, for those who don't know, my job entails that I coach really really young kids how to debate. Like maybe grade school. I start teaching as early as grade 4. I've even started teaching people as young as 8 years old how to do public speaking. And you realize that obviously they don't want to be here, right?
They don't want to be there.
They're kids. And yes, they're there probably because their parents forced them and this is like something their parents made them do, but I need to meet them halfway or maybe meet them 70% of the way. And the effort now is on you as a coach or me as their teacher in this case to make them enjoy coming back. And I realized that it shouldn't be different for older students. It shouldn't be different if you're high school, if you're college, because debate in the end is a hobby. You cannot expect people to make it their whole life at the start. I mean, there will be some people, like Kyle and I, as you can see, 10 years plus going strong in debate, but that's because we genuinely like it. And it doesn't come naturally for people to like debate. How did you end up liking debate?
Well, I really did not like debating at first
Oh,
because you need to do 7 minutes. I could barely do 2 minutes.
okay.
And around half of that or more were just me saying, and I don't know if it's very obvious to our listeners just how much I say, because I have a way of taking out the ums.
Mm.
I put some there just to make it believable that I'm still a human being. But the amount of ums goes into into the hundreds for every particular episode that we have. And so I really didn't like it. I think it clicked when there was something that I was saying or something that I prepped and I wasn't sure about whether it was good or not. But the coaches and there were some people from the college counterpart of our debate organization that came over and also watched and were like, you know what, we loved it. So it's still imperfect. There's still a lot more that you can do, but in terms of just like the core idea, it was very interesting. And I was like, huh, I've never thought of how rare it was for me as a child to have an adult tell me like, you know what, I like your ideas. I think that they're very interesting. So that's when I was like, Oh, okay. So even when I'm not sure, it's still something that's worth listening to. And that's what made it click for me because I grew up in an environment where the adults in my life, not necessarily my parents or my family, but like more so teachers. I grew up in an environment where my teachers, authority figures, didn't want to hear me talk about these things. Like, the story about me almost getting kicked out of school because I called my science teacher a liar.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listeners, what happened was in second grade, our science teacher was telling us about the states of matter, and she was like, okay, we have solid, liquid, and gas. That's it. That's all there is. But every single day, I brought my children's visual encyclopedia with me. And I know for a fact that there's at least one more state of matter, which is plasma. They didn't get into the Bose-Einstein condensates yet. I don't know. It was 2005. So it was like super well known at the time. But I was like, no, there's a fourth one. There's plasma. So either you don't know it or you're lying to us. And it's like, just go to the guidance office and just like, "Oh, goodbye." And I was like, okay, fine. So I grew up in an environment where the teachers are like, if you want to add something new or contradict your teacher, that's not something that they'd like. And so in an environment like debating where there are older people, but they're not necessarily authorities that can tell you what to think. That was very empowering for me. And that's the reason why, like, sometimes debating is tiring, sometimes doing the podcast is tiring, sometimes doing debate work is tiring. But I go back to there must be some people that might be listening to me. There must be some people who are in a similar position to me, and I want to give them that opportunity or want to help extend that opportunity to them where they can feel heard and feel that what they have to say is interesting, even though they might not be sure about whether it's right or not. So that's when it clicked for me. How about you?
I think I come from a very different background. Not that authorities listen to me or anything. That's a common problem we both have as kids, and I guess a lot of kids in general. But I liked public speaking. Before I joined debate, I was a competitive public speaker. Now you might must be wondering like what's that like? Well, I did a lot of oratory stuff. I would join speech competitions where I would be given a script, I would memorize it, maybe some impromptu things. So, speaking was not a problem for me. What was a problem though was I was getting tired that everything was written for me. I was good at memorization, I was good at presenting other people's ideas. In debate, I found that it was a place for me to explore ideas, learn new things, expand on those. So, I mean, for the longest time, I did not like debate for the sport. I liked it for everything else, like the learning part, the forming ideas, organizing ideas, and finding the most me way to say things. And I guess that just proves that there are going to be different types of debaters, and these debaters will join for very, very different reasons. Some people I've learned like it for the friendship. They like competing. Some people I know like it because they get to meet new people and they get to interact with different schools. And those are all valid. The point is, when you are a coach, when you are a teacher, I think there needs to be an effort to figure out the starting point or the hook that will get people interested or at least get them to see the value of debate. Like for instance, the goal of this podcast, while a big chunk of it is to help debaters, another is to humanize debate, that we are not like the people in Candy Jar that speak super duper fast. Oh gosh, Candy Jar.
Just the mention
um,
of that
uh,
movie makes you go
I
like,
mean, it's not a bad.
no.
It's not a bad movie. It's just not
I think it's a
relatable.
bad movie.
It's not relatable at all to our circuit, right, or our debate world. But I'm sure there are debate worlds that do have, and they feel seen by that movie. So I'm not gonna judge it too harshly.
You think there are people who feel seen by spoilers for Candy Jar? You think that there are people who feel seen when people, yeah, let's throw the final because we're so salty about not getting into our preferred schools.
I don't remember that being the reason they threw the finals, but like yeah, I
That's
guess.
100% what happened in the
Oh, I
final.
don't
In
know.
in the finals, you're like, I want to get to Stanford, and I got into Berkeley instead.
Oh, what a tragedy.
Oh man.
No, but yes, I think the point is though, lots of people join debate for different reasons. So the first thing I would say, now related to the actual title of this episode, if you want to get people interested in debate, you have to stop thinking about yourself, right? Because the reason you like debate will not be the reason other people like will join or stay in debate, and that's completely fine. When I teach kids, one of my first activities is not to teach them the format. It's not to tell them about the competitive nature of debate. It's usually to give them free reign to speak about anything they want. And this is the part where kids are like, really? Anything? Even if it's not like a debate topic? I'm like, yeah, you have a strong opinion on Mr. Beast or Minecraft, and I use these two examples a lot because, you know,
Most of them, yeah.
if you're 12 years old for some reason your whole life, it's the most relatable thing for some
Or
reason.
Roblox.
Or Roblox, right? And I tell them, what is a strong opinion or idea you have about Mr. Beast or Roblox or Minecraft? And I had a student give me like a really shy student who was not confident enough to give a 4 minute speech. They talked for 6 whole minutes about why Minecraft needs to add like more gaming elements. They need to add, for example, more customization, which, honestly, I didn't agree. I think Minecraft has a lot of customization. But the point was, I got them speaking and I got them to see that you have ideas. You just don't know yet the debate stuff. You don't know yet about like international relations and politics, and that's completely fine. You don't need to know these things to get good at debate. You just need to have the ability to have strong opinions, to formulate ideas, and to be passionate enough to talk about them. Right. And then from there, I slowly transitioned them into okay, you have all of these ideas about Minecraft. Let's try making them into an argument using this structure. And they're like, okay, I can do that. And then from there, I say, okay, now we add a frame or give me some context. Pretend I don't know anything about Minecraft. Tell me about it. And now they have their first speaker speech. And then, okay, tell me, what do you think other people on the internet have been saying about Minecraft that you don't agree with? Add it in there. And then now they have rebuttals. And by the end of maybe 1 week, they can do a full debate speech. And then I tell them, okay, you did this for Minecraft. I will try giving you another topic. In fact, I will give you a topic you might not agree with, but you already know what to do. Try doing it there.
Yeah. So I got three things from that, and it's very important for any educator. I would say number one is in terms of meeting people where they're at, you need to assess their prior knowledge, not just in terms of how much they already know about debate, but also what are their current interests. And it's good if you connect whatever it is you're teaching to something that they already know about. The second thing I would like to point out is make the journey manageable and break it down into parts so as to avoid knowledge chasms. So you just frame it as if they were knowledge gaps rather than knowledge chasms. And thirdly, increase the odds that they will believe in themselves. So we
Mm.
call that self efficacy
Yes.
by making it seem like, oh, it's something that you can already do, right? Like like everything flows neatly within that process. So, for example, why is it that people become very interested in goats? Sorry, why do I get interested in
Yeah,
goats?
don't drag me into that.
So, what happens whenever I fall into a Wikipedia rabbit hole is something happens in my life that makes me think, okay, but if this is true, how about this? Or I wonder what else I'm missing. So I'm connecting it to something I already know, something I already experienced in my life. That's connecting it to prior knowledge, and that creates curiosity, right? And then once I get into the initial Wikipedia page for something, I see links to a different page, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm already here. I might as well take the next step. So it's not a huge journey for me to go like from the different species of goats to the whole concept of evolution. Because from my perspective, it's not jumping from one field to another. It's me seeing like the different skips and hops that would take for me to get from point A to point B. So instead of me perceiving it as a knowledge chasm, which people don't like it when you're interested in just like Minecraft and all of a sudden people go like, okay, but now you have to learn about relativistic physics. That's a huge jump. For people who don't know anything about it, it's a knowledge chasm. But if you ease your way into it, for example, how would you connect Minecraft to relativistic physics?
So you might talk about like the game mechanics and look at like redstone devices and how they use force, and then from there you can talk about,
Like
okay,
different forces
yeah, yeah, right.
and
I
then eventually gravity and then gravitational forces as
mm.
found in Einstein's theory of relativity. But anyway, yeah, that's the point, right? Instead of it being a huge knowledge chasm, frame it as like a manageable journey where, okay, it's a very short distance from where you're at to where you want to go. And then you get the immediate reward of, oh, okay, I know this, on to the next thing. And that's how rabbit holes work.
Mm.
And then lastly, with respect to self-efficacy, just the empowering feeling of being able to decide what you learn and the empowering feeling of learning things immediately, that's really good. Because that's a paradox that we have, which is that we are very curious people. We are a very curious species. But at the same time, majority of people do not like school. And there have been studies that demonstrate this as an empirical fact. People do not like school. And a lot of people say that it's because it's a lot of emotional and cognitive investment. You need to spend a lot of your attention. You need to pay a huge amount of attention to learn any particular thing. And you don't know whether it's going to be useful to you or not. And so, an invitation to learn is an invitation to use your limited cognitive resources in a very risky way. And so, by connecting it to things like your prior knowledge, it makes people more likely to believe that, okay, I'm not sure where this is going, but it's likely something that'll be interesting and useful to me because it's something that's connected to something that's already interesting and useful to me.
So I see the role of coaches and teachers not as one that dumps information for their students to pick up, but I would see it more as you are making it easier. You're weaving information together for them in a way that it's easy for them to digest. So I think the first pragmatic tip I have, whether you are teaching debate to someone else or if you are a senior in your debate organization and you want people to be interested, or you are someone that just wants to drag your friend along and get them interested in debate because you want them as a teammate one day, the first step is to really check with them. Do not focus on debate yet. Do not focus on the rules. Do not focus on what the topics are, right? Which is a very common mistake I see a lot of, not mistake, but it's a tendency a lot of coaches and teachers do. You should really first check with them. What do they like? What are their favorite things to talk about, to learn about, to dive into if it's a rabbit hole? Because you learn a lot about a person based on that. I think a lot of students, a lot of beginners, non debaters, or beginner debaters, they have a lot of insecurity. And I understand why. Because debate is such a vast field. If you want to get them interested, you have to first show them that debate is not very different from other things you already do. So it might be a skill that they have. Maybe they like research. Focus on that. Maybe they like public speaking. Use that as the hook. Maybe they like some weird niche topic. Even that can be a hook. Because debate, the benefit of debate is we talk about so many different things. And we use so many different skills that there's bound to be an overlap between what we do and what they already do as non debaters.
Yeah, for example, there was a student that we had who was really interested in swimming. Like they're a swimmer and then they left. And I met them and I was like, "Oh, but why did you leave swimming?" And they said, "Oh, it's because of the drama." And from there, like in their personal drama in a sports team, you can ask like, "Okay, where is this drama coming from in your opinion?" And maybe it's like, "Oh, there's a lot of rumors going around." And maybe you can ask like, "Why do you think that rumors spread this much?" They might say, "Oh, it's because like some people just really are like that." Maybe they would be a little bit sexist and say, "Oh, because women they like spreading stuff around like this." This happened to me where I was talking to someone who had left their varsity and they were saying like women because they gossip a lot, and I was like, why do you think that way? Like, let's examine that. And I like to think that it contributed a little bit to their feminist awakening
No,
or something
I
like
hope
that,
so.
where it was more like, oh yeah, you're right, there might be some pressure to gossip as part of their social circles, but why is there that pressure? And there might be like this underlying cultural thing that might have been imposed and stuff like that. So you can always start from some place and make them go down their own rabbit holes. But we need to simulate that by asking them the right and interesting questions that are not so far away that they will never be able to answer it.
Mhm.
Make it manageable. So, knowledge gaps over knowledge chasms is the thing that I want to say.
And I think you might be wondering, this only applies if you're talking to people one by one. What if I have an entire pool of 30 students? And it's very hard to pull them aside one by one and ask them what their interests are. And I get that. I've been in situations where I was in front of a class of completely new people. There are 30 of them, very vast interests, very vast backgrounds, vast skill sets, different knowledges, right? I think one way you can do it is by starting small. Ask them a very basic question. And then from there, you will find that people always have opinions. So when I'm talking to the youngest group I deal with, the grade 4, at least in debate, I deal with other kids younger, but that's not yet debatey. But when I do, I usually start with something very basic, something people have a strong opinion on, which is, do you like pineapples on pizza? And then you can see the class go crazy. Like each of them will have their own opinion, and then I'll call on people who haven't been speaking that much. If they don't have a strong opinion, that's also an opinion, right? And then I ask them, why do you think it's fine either way? Why do you not mind? What do you think is the most important part of a pizza? If not that topic, I ask them about cats versus dogs. And then from there, I go a little bit more serious. Do you like zoos? Right? And then you just grow from there. So even if you're dealing with a big class, there will always be a starting point that is accessible for everyone. And then from there, you can start stratifying. Now, I'm not a big fan of like arranging students according to skill level because I feel like there's a way to teach everyone at the same time. But if it's really not manageable, for example, you have someone that has already so much debate experience, they're already averaging like 77s in the like speaker scale, or you might have someone who can't even reach 1 minute. In that case, I would probably divide the group into two so that they don't feel intimidated or don't feel like bogged down by the other. But in most cases, you can always start with something that even the most skilled or even the most new of debaters can participate in. One of my favorite activities, and if you have done a session with us already, you will know this. I like starting with a game where we kind of role play as either a government organization or we role play as a different profession, and then you just play with that. Maybe I'll force you to defend a particular level of funding. Maybe I'm gonna throw you out of a hot air balloon and you have to justify why your job is the most important one that should not be sacrificed to the sea. Right? You can make it fun. I suggest gamifying debate, not as debate itself, because I know that's a game already, but you can find other ways to integrate debate skills and gradually introduce it to them without overwhelming them yet with this is a 7 minute speech, this is protective time, this is a POI, these are the structures, these are structural mechanizations, whatever debate terms are being used now.
Yeah, I would say that debate really is gamified. It's gamified political discussions, but from the perspective of a newcomer, right? That's too many rules. Like a lot of people, for example, when I think about football, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea what's happening. And that's the reason why it's very hard for me to get into it, except for like vibes. Like
Why?
in Welcome to Wrexham, you watch Welcome to Wrexham, it's just like I still have no idea what's happening, but I'm into the vibes.
Mm.
But without knowing much about the vibes, if you show me like a football game right now, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. People are kicking the ball. It looks quite impressive, but I don't know why people are shouting when someone kicks over the line or behind the line. I don't know what's happening. So it's a useful tool, gamification, but you also need to think about the learning curve in learning that game. So if you bombard them with so many rules immediately before you let them have fun, that's not going to work as well as it could, in my opinion.
Right. So that's the first step, right? Find what will get them hooked into debate. Find what got them interested, what made them approach your table to sign up if you are in recruitment season, or get them to showcase what they already know. So the first step is really build their confidence. And I know it seems like I'm preaching to a choir. Everyone knows this, but the application is very different. It's not just praising them. It's not just making them give a speech and then highlighting what they're good at. Actually, have them speak in their element. Have them talk about something they are comfortable talking about. And then from there, you can hopefully already get them hooked. But the next stage to that is, well, this is still a sport, right? You still need to teach them the rules. Please do not teach them all of the rules at once. I think you also have to bridge that gap slowly, and teaching them all the format rules in one day, even if it is the most efficient way to do it, it's not going to be the most sustainable way to do it. And I know this is not realistic advice for those that are under a strict deadline or they only have limited number of training days, but I think there is a way to get them to understand the rules without necessarily bombarding them. Maybe have a day that's dedicated just to making arguments. And then the next day you start introducing a new concept. So they're still learning a lot of things. They're just not learning them like one chunk at a time. You want to try making the learning seamless. So I would not suggest, for instance, one day dedicated to learning the format, the next day dedicated to learning about feminism. If you can, have them do one small chunk of the format, maybe teach them the argument structure, and then give them a slightly feminist topic. And then the next day, you can teach them a new thing and then give them a slightly harder feminist topic. So by the end of 1 week, if that's like our hypothetical timeline, by day 5 or by Friday, they will already know the full format and have a good understanding of feminism. And that's still faster compared to dedicating 2 days just to format, then 3 separate days to feminism.
Yeah, I would also say that it's because you made the tasks more manageable, right? So it's one thing for you to go like, okay, your task, and you don't know anything, but your task is to make a 7 minute speech, and you have framing, you have a policy, you have arguments, you have
Mm.
rebuttals, and you need to have at least 3 minutes for rebuttals and then 4 minutes for your arguments. So that's a lot. That's a huge task. It's just a very complex task. So if you want to try to make it more manageable for them, make the complexity lower as well. So your task is to make an argument with this structure. And that structure is very intuitive, very easy to follow. That's it. Make an argument. And then after that, make a rebuttal. Here's a format for a rebuttal. Here are some examples of rebuttals. That's more manageable. And then by the end, you can say, okay, now make a speech with an argument and with a rebuttal. And for them, it's not this very big complex task of there are 7 minutes and you have to manage your time, do the second and stuff like that. It's not that complex. because from their perspective, it's just one thing that they learned and another thing that they learned, and they just have to say one before the other. So if you manage the complexity of tasks, it becomes much more easy to manage for the beginner as well. So that's a huge tip that I want to give, which is you want to make it more manageable and more predictable. And that's the reason why if you have a structure, you give them a structure before making them do that manageable task.
So that's in terms of teaching them debate, right? Like make it manageable, cut it down, make it seamless. Now, you might also be wondering, okay, I'm doing all of that, but I see that my students or the people in my organization or the people I'm working with, they're they're still not interested in debate. And for that, I would say two things. The first is it's probably because they do not feel the progress happening, right? A risk that you have with making things seamless is it might also be seamless for them to the point that they get bored. They might not learn anything. And for this, at least in the school I teach in, what we do is we record all their speeches. We show them this is where you started, and then after a few weeks or after a few sessions, look where you are now. Compare it. You've gone a long way, you didn't even notice. And that is a great feeling for a kid. It's also a great feeling for anyone in debate to see, like, oh, my score is increasing. But the thing is, I don't like relying on scores. I don't like relying on whether you broke, whether you made it to a further out round, because those things are always going to be up to luck. I mean, obviously, there's skill involved, but one wrong like move can make you feel horrible and will make you feel like, oh, all my progress is undone. So what can you do? I think you should have a culture or develop a culture where people are much more reflective of their own skills. So what I usually do with younger kids, and it does not mean older kids cannot do it, is after each speech I make them write a little reflection. Maybe three things that you did well, three things you want to work on. Next day, I will make you focus on a new skill, but take a look at your areas of improvement, focus on those. And then the goal is your list of things to work on. Hopefully, as the sessions go by, they become things that you write down in like strengths or things that you did well. Like have a paper trail, maybe have a video, maybe have them record their own speeches on their phone. That is something Kyle and I used to do a lot. I don't have records of them anymore. In fact, I've lost all of my old debate speeches and old debate recordings. But knowing that I had some way of tracking my progress and knowing like intuitively that I like this speech more. Or I could see from the timestamps that this speech used to be 5 minutes. Now I got to 6 minutes. Look, I'm now at 7 minutes. Oops, I went overtime and then I corrected. There is going to be some level of progress that you see. So there's lots of ways to do it. Either have them do reflections, either have them record their speeches, and you don't have to force them to listen to it, but just knowing they have it there will be some feeling of progress or some feeling of improvement as they keep doing that again and again, and they keep like on the back of their minds they are reflecting without even trying.
The self evaluation thing you're talking about, your self assessment thing,
Mm.
that's super important in building up self efficacy as well, because you're training them to be more aware of what they're doing. So there are lots of Olympians who, let's say a discus thrower, when they do the spin before they throw the discus, they already have a feeling of, is this going to be a good throw or not? And that is a process of them constantly self evaluating their progress, self evaluating their performance. And this is something that would actually make coaches obsolete, but you still need to teach them how they eventually get to that point where they can properly do self evaluation. So you have to guide them through this early process. If you really want to make uh, organizations like Debatable obsolete, the number one thing that you need to learn is how do you encourage a culture of self evaluation and how do you make that culture very effective? So one of the things that you can do is make success criteria. Like have the group form their own success criteria, which is to say, let's give an example of an argument and we can go like, okay, based on this argument, what makes this work? And then you get ideas from the rest of the group and go like, okay, so we have this success criteria. We have a list of things that would make an argument work. Let's make our own arguments and test it against these criteria. And so by doing that, that's basically what coaches do already, right? When you have personal comments, when you have personal feedback, judges or coaches test it against some of their own success criteria, even if they don't know that that's what they're doing. They just it's just second nature to them to go like, oh, this doesn't feel right. But it doesn't feel right to them because they've already internalized that they're testing certain arguments or certain speeches against some subliminal or implicit success criteria that they have. But if you make it explicit, it's easier to remember, it's easier to learn as well for newcomers.
So that's the first part. You now know at least some tips. Of course, these will be subject to your own interpretations, subject to your own experience with your different organizations, or even with yourself. But another question you might have upon pressing this episode might be, how do I get people to constantly be interested in debate? Because it's one thing to hook them in, it's different to have them stay. And this is a lot of uh people, right? A lot of people, they get burnt out. They feel like they reach a plateau. They feel like they're no longer improving. And that's a little bit more difficult. I've reached that stage multiple times. I'm sure Kyle has as well. Have you?
Yes. Yes. And that was because I was thinking about my scores.
Mm.
And when I got over that, I went like, okay, if I wanna improve my scores or be a better debater, I think this is a good point for me to start experimenting. Right? So I give tasks for myself like, okay, this prep time, even though I'm going to be first speaker, I'm going to be treating it like I'm the third speaker. So I try to approach being a prime minister or leader of opposition with issues. There are other times where I went like, okay, how many High School Musical lyrics can I fit in here? So it's just a lot of experimentation. That was very empowering for me.
Great. So I think though that relies a lot on people being aware, right? As individual debaters, they are aware of what they need to do, but sometimes you don't get students like Kyle that will just actively experiment on their own. So what I recommend, and I do this with around the high school level students that I deal with, and they're really good already. They feel like I don't know how to improve further. I keep following the instructions. I keep applying the feedback. I think what your job now as a coach is going to be is to break those down again, right? It's a repeat of what you did at the beginning. So have them see what they already know, have them recognize for themselves where the gaps are. And then instead of making it a little bit seamless, you want to make the goalposts a little bit further. You want to give them challenges. In Kyle's case, it's using whip structure in a first speaker, which is objectively difficult to do, but it's still a realistic goal. So what I would do, depending on the student, is okay, you're really good at IR. Let's try branching out your knowledge into a field you're not very familiar with. Maybe talk about sports. And then to get there, obviously, do not just jump immediately to learning about all the rules and all the intricacies of sports. Maybe start from the IR angle. Right? Use what you already know and then force them to reach a particular skill level in something else. So let's say you're a really good first speaker. Now I'm going to challenge you, use everything you learn. Let's transition you into being a whip. And that keeps things interesting for them. It keeps them coming back because they may feel like they've plateaued, but that's probably because they don't know what else there is to improve on. And that's the difficult part about being a coach. You have to be very aware of where your students are at. You have to be very aware of where everyone else is at. And you might also be wondering, I'm not good enough to do this. I am not really a coach. I am also a fellow debater learning. Doesn't matter. I think I've had this imposter syndrome for such a long time also. I've started coaching when I was 17. Okay, that's pretty young. That's like first year college at least before K to 12. I don't know how old. How old are college kids now?
College kid, I think they enter college when they're 18.
Okay, yeah.
Is
That
that
18, 19,
Yeah,
something.
because
Yeah.
we entered college and you were 16,
Yeah, 16,
right?
17, yeah.
So K to 12 added 2 years, so it will be 8.
Yeah. So you might think that I'm not good enough to do this, right? It has nothing to do with debate. It's just awareness. It's your ability to look at the progress of everyone else. I hate to say this, but you gotta be a little bit of an empath to do this. And that's something you can train as well. Look at the progress, look at where people are at, ask them questions. You don't have to read people's minds. You don't need to know if they're good at something or they feel insecure about something. You just have to ask. And even with the very few words that debaters tell you, you can psychoanalyze quite a bit about what their mindsets are, what their hesitations are, what their roadblocks are.
Yeah, and if you have enough experience, you get a knack for this kind of thing, like the psychoanalysis bit, where I remember yesterday, um, they asked for like an extension for prep, and immediately my thought there is, okay, so they either are struggling to come up with ideas. And what I would say, kasi, is no one is actually struggling making up ideas. What actually happens is people don't believe in the ideas that they come up with.
Mm.
And so they stop themselves before they even bring it up. So what people end up thinking is like, oh, I could explore this, but it's probably wrong. And I know that this is true because that was me when I was growing up, right? And I've confirmed this with a lot of other people as well. And so it could be that, or they are able to write their ideas down, but they're not confident enough in the ideas that they already wrote down. So they ask for more time because they need more in order to make themselves feel like it's a good speech. So at the heart of it, there's always like a personal reason, like a personal psychological reason why they might be feeling these hangups. So you need to ask these kinds of questions as well. And I think the more specific the question, the better. Like, what was the experience like when you were prepping? Like, how did you feel about the ideas you were bringing up? Stuff like that. So it's a very useful thing also to drop by prep and listen in or maybe like interview them sometimes. There is a risk there that they will not appreciate it when you drop by, but that's also something that's worth analyzing. Why are you afraid of your coach who is here to help you prep and diagnose your prep problems? Why are you scared of them listening in on your prep? And that might be because you have like an ego thing where you don't want to be seen in your vulnerable state intellectually. And that's true, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to look dumb in front of the coach. And like, no, look dumb in front of your coach because that's why they're there.
Also, we've been done before. Your coaches have been there, and that makes them the best people to help. So, I guess to wrap up, there are three things that you need to keep in mind whether you are a coach or someone that is trying to mentor someone or someone that's trying to get other people interested in debate, whether it's school wide, region wide, right? It's always going to be different levels. The first is make the tasks small. Second is make them manageable, but also make them explicit at the same time. So they want to see their progress, they want to feel progress, but you also want to do that because it makes it easier for you in the future to diagnose, to support, to help, to advise.
Yeah, I want to emphasize this is the thing that I want to end on. I want to emphasize if it's recruitment season and you're meeting people for the first time, the first experience that they will have with respect to debate is so crucial to how much they will enjoy it in the future sessions. Like, you can change a first impression, but not easily. And that's the reason why, to this day, I know that rationally, I know that I probably know more about sports than someone else, right? Like, I know like the history of the Olympics. I know like the stories of particular athletes and stuff like that. But I still hate sports debates. And I self-assessed, I analyzed why I feel that way, and it comes back down to the very first debate speech that I had. I wasn't prepared, I wasn't ready. My very first debate was about whether we should still have PE in schools. And I bombed. I bombed so hard. The reason why I don't like sports debates is because the very first memory that I have of sports debates is me sucking. And that was a very bad feeling to have. So the easiest thing to remember informs the way that you view this entire field. So, since the accessibility of memory informs the way that you see the world, and this is true empirically speaking as well, I could give you studies, but that just emphasizes how important it is for you to make the learning environment as wholesome, as inclusive, and as empathetic to newcomers as possible. Because if you are a very experienced debater already, if you consider yourself an expert, I don't consider myself an expert, but if you do, there is this thing that happens where experts kind of suck at teaching, and that's because of something called expert blindness, where an expert, because they've internalized all of these lessons, they don't remember what it's like to be a newcomer. So the main thing that I want to impart is, because it's so important to make a good first impression, try to be as empathetic as possible. And that's it for this episode of Debatable. If you want to experience the way that Nina and I coach firsthand, maybe you can sign up for Debatable with. Yeah, I need to put a plug. Yeah, so if you wanna experience what we've been talking about firsthand and you don't have a coach on your own, maybe you can sign up for Debatable with, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye bye.